Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. We all know by now that Nick Walker was unable to compete at this year's Mr. Olympia due to a hamstring tear occurring just a day before he flew to the Olympia venue. This was devastating to us fans, but of course even more devastating to Nick. Nick has worked his whole life to be Mr. Olympia. It's a childhood dream of his. To add insult to injury, quite literally, Nick said this was his best he's ever looked, and it was the smoothest prep he's ever had. And yeah, by the looks of his updates before the Olympia, he would have been gunning for that title this year easily. But just how close would Nick have been? Would he have gotten stopped by Samson like he did at the Arnold earlier this year? Or would we have seen Nick Walker yet again live up to his nickname and see a mutated version of his last physiques? In today's video, I want to try to answer that question. Where would Nick Walker have placed at this year's Olympia? A little disclaimer, this is in no way supposed to tear Nick down or to be rude in any way. I was absolutely gutted for Nick when I heard he couldn't compete. I felt all the emotions. But at the same time, I highly admire his work ethic and his physique as a whole, and I have insanely high expectations for him in this video. Don't take this video as a if only he could have competed. Take it as a lot of people were lucky he couldn't compete, because I can tell you right now, Nick Walker was not fucking around going into this Olympia. So this video is with all due respect to Nick Walker. Anyway, that's enough introduction. If you guys like these types of videos, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe for more. So here's how I'll be running this comparison. I'm going to use the official top 3 photos of Derek, Hadi, and Samson. Sorry to the other competitors, but Nick was placing top 4 at the bare minimum if he competed here without injury, and I'm being insanely generous by saying top 4. So I'll go ahead and use the top 3's photos and then add Nick beside them with his 2022 Olympia version. You may be asking, why this version? Why not the Arnold version? It's his more recent version after all. Or heck, why even use this version at all since he was looking a lot bigger and a lot better in his final update photos? Well, here's what we're going to do. Since he was a bit downsized at the Arnold, I didn't want to use that version, especially because Nick promised a bigger and freakier version more akin to his Olympia version from last year. So we'll start by comparing that version of Nick Walker against the 2023 top 3, and we'll see how well he would have stacked up with that older version. Then we'll throw up his latest prep update of each of those poses beside him to see how he was looking and where he was going to be improved. This should give us a picture of how close he was then and how much closer he would have got with the improvements he made. Also, to keep this video brief, since I already broke down the 2023 top 3 in my video about Hadi being robbed, I'll keep my thoughts to a minimum about those guys. I ranked them in every pose in that video, so I'll be talking about Nick mainly and only talking about them as it relates to Nick. Anyway, let's start with the front double. And to be honest, I never liked how Nick hit this pose. When he lifts his upper body up, I think he looks a lot better, but to be fair, I looked at how he hit it at the Olympia, and he was doing this version where he was crunching down. Yeah, it's good for some elements like looking like a freak, but in the front double, we don't want so much of that. 2 things I look for in this shot are a good set of arms and a good X-frame, the V-taper, you know, those silhouette qualities. Nick has the best arms for sure, but the silhouette aspects of the pose are where he really falters. We all know that his waist is pretty thick, and while he crunches down, it makes his abs look absolutely insane, but it shows his waist at the widest. Furthermore, the quad sweep was, or maybe still is, one of Nick's biggest weaknesses. And with him making his waist look wider by crunching down and just looking so massive up top, he's making those legs look stubby yet again. Overall, I can see some appeal here and there. This pose is definitely very mutant-like for him, but I think it kind of makes him look like a toad. Now, I ranked the top 3 guys in my first video with Samson in 3rd, Derek in 2nd, and Hadi in 1st. I definitely feel a little wrong about putting Nick in last because, like I said, while he looks very unaesthetic, he's still very freaky and massive and has the best arms in the world. And all of that has to account for something. So I'm going to put him in 3rd above Samson, but keeping Derek and Hadi in 1st and 2nd respectively. I think Samson's really smooth and his arms are the weakest. Nick is definitely the odd man out here though, so I can see the argument for him in 4th, but I think he brings enough good qualities that I just can't put him in last. But when we look at Nick's latest updates in the shop, he would have definitely moved up. Look at the legs, they blew up. He took the criticism and used it for fuel to work on those weak points. And he's fixing the pose as a whole. He's not fully stretching the torso, but he's not fully crunching down either. Overall, with this new posing and the improvements in the legs, it really helps his proportions. Both of those changes make Nick's waist look smaller while still showcasing his great abs, and of course, the arms are still looking great. With these changes, I actually have Nick jumping up all the way to 2nd. I don't think Derek's arms are all that great. I think they look too smooth, and his lower body, while improved, still needs to come up to match that insanely wide upper body. And since Nick would have had some better proportions, he would at least get a little closer in the silhouette department compared to Derek and even Hadi. Hadi though would still probably remain in 1st. He has the 2nd best arms in the lineup and would probably have a similar level of hardness as Nick and overall conditioning. I think it could honestly be close, but when Hadi can punch back in Nick's strong areas like the arms, graininess, and conditioning while still maintaining a better silhouette, I'd give him the slight edge over Nick. As you'll notice in the front lat spread, there is no Nick Walker. I do this every time I do a comparison with Nick. His front lat spread is just too poor to waste my time with. He never hits it in a routine anyway, so finding a high quality photo of him in the front lat spread is a bitch, and it's just not worth the time. And no, I don't think it'll be much better from last year. It's not something he can do a whole lot to improve since the main limiting factor is his structure. He was improving it a little bit each time he competed recently, but at that current trajectory, it would not have been enough for him to place anywhere else but last in this one. So we just have these three gentlemen here, and unlike the other poses, I'm actually going to change the order of two of these guys. I'm still putting Derek last out of these guys. I do think he's good enough to beat Nick, so I think he's going to be third in this shot. But in my other video, I had Hadi in second, and as I was editing that video, I knew I made a mistake. I think Hadi has the great X-frame and taper of Samson and the thickness, but I like his stomach more. It's a bit more sunken in and more defined. I think these two guys are pretty far ahead of the others anyway, and both have great poses, but I'm going to rectify what I said in my first video and put Samson in second and Hadi in first. The side chest is probably the most competitive pose of the entire comparison. Every guy is really good. Even though every guy is good, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one simply because I'd be saying the same things about everyone here more or less. Now, sticking Nick in the lineup is interesting. Initially, I had a very close ranking of Samson in third, Derek in second, and Hadi in first. Samson is better in the pecs, but Nick looks to be carved out of granite and is much sharper than Samson head to toe. But on the flip side, I think Nick beats Derek easily with the same overall condition and density. Derek is close in dryness and conditioning in the lower body, but that does not translate to the upper body. And then I don't believe Nick does quite enough to overtake Hadi. Hadi has some dense pecs with the most detail out of the lineup. What I like most about Hadi though is how wide he looks shoulder to shoulder. In the side poses, what we look for is the width of the physique from the side and of course the thickness. I think Nick's thickness is unmatched, but Hadi has a good level of thickness, but with his posing and how wide he is naturally, he looks the widest from this angle. So all in all, you can really put Nick anywhere, but maybe first and I'd be happy. I can see the arguments for him placing last, third, etc. Personally, I'm going to put him in second, but put him wherever you want and I wouldn't bat an eye. However, when you throw in Nick's latest update, I think it makes a better argument for him placing a little bit higher. I'm a little bit more confident with putting Nick in second after I saw that update. We probably would have seen a bigger overall package in this shot rather than something specifically improved, but I think that overall size as a whole helps him cement a higher finish. The pecs look a little bit thicker, the side leg looks bigger, del, arm, really all of it. That added size is a solid case for him being closer to first in this shot than closer to fourth. For all intents and purposes, I'll keep him in second, pushing Derek and Samson to third and fourth. The back double pose is a little less competitive than the side chest, but for only half of the guys. I have Samson and Hadi in fourth and third respectively. Samson is just last by default, the condition in the hams and glutes is not good, and we all know his back is the weakest body part of his, and it's just weak in general. Hadi is a pretty big step up in quality from Samson, but against the two best backs in the world right now, I'm still going to have to separate him from the other two guys. Now this is where things get interesting. Like I said, these are the two best backs in the world, and I actually have a pretty interesting hot take with this one. Nick actually has the best back double pose in the world right now. Yes, I know, Derek is being compared to Phil, and everyone is saying he won the title this year because of his tremendous back. And I do agree that Derek's back is great. In fact, I think it's better than Nick, but I still have Nick winning the pose as a whole. If Derek's back is a 9.5 out of 10, then Nick's is pretty close to a 9. There's just so much jagged detail and density packed into Nick's back. But what wins Nick the pose is the other elements in conjunction, with a back that is close enough to Derek's. The arms and the shoulders are easily Nick's, his biceps even from this angle are insane, and in the lower body, these guys kind of trade off. Derek has the better glutes, the striations are just too deep, but then again, Nick Walker has some striated glutes too, it's just not to the level of Derek's, which is probably a genetic thing because Nick was absolutely shredded. Derek takes the glutes, but the hamstrings are not close. Derek's are dry and respectable in size, but as I've said multiple times, Nick has the best hamstrings in the world. Anyway, since Nick's back is close to Derek's, and then you add in the other elements that Nick won into this, I think that pushes Nick over the finish line in the pose as a whole. I know most of you guys will probably not agree, but that's the way I see it. A pose is more than just what's in the name. You have to examine everything head to toe, and Nick Walker won more aspects of the pose while bringing the second best back in the world. Now looking at his last update pick of this pose, I don't really notice any major improvements from this point. But that's okay really because he didn't need to do anything. He won with this last year's version. And yeah, I know the hamstrings are looking a little weird in this photo because they aren't flexed, but this is just a shot in the gym, and I'm fairly sure this was taken after he tore one of those hamstrings. So it was probably hard for him to even stand in the shot, let alone flex the remaining hamstring. And you can still tell, even before peak week, Nick Walker was already bringing great roundness and dryness. I think we would have seen a similar version to the 2022 Olympia at minimum. Going over to the second back pose, I just went ahead and used Nick's Arnold version of this pose to save us some time. I know I said we'd probably get something more similar to the 2022 Olympia version rather than the Arnold version. However, for this pose specifically, this just wouldn't be the case. This is Nick's most improved pose. He was so narrow at previous shows, even at his most recent Olympia appearance, but at the Arnold, he finally learned how to spread his wings properly and display all of his width. And as we'll see in his updates, the new posing continued into this Olympia prep and would have been similar to what we saw on this Olympia stage. But we'll get to that in a minute. In this pose, originally, I had Hadi in first with the insane width, and then I had Samson in a default third, because the way he's posing here is really hiding a lot of his width, and I put Derek in a very close second to Hadi. I think it's quite easy to fit Nick in this lineup. I'd put him in third, moving Samson to fourth. Like I said, Samson changed his posing up on this one, and it doesn't look as wide as he should. And again, his condition is the worst in the lineup. Nick is actually pretty wide with a surprising amount of taper and some okay detail. Honestly, Nick's strongest area in the shot is those gnarly hamstrings, but that can't make up the ground against the two gentlemen in front of him who beat him on width, detail, or both. I don't think a whole lot changes when we take a look at Nick's latest update in this shot. Do keep in mind that he didn't post a whole lot of rear lat spreads for this prep, so the most recent photo, the one you see now, is 10 weeks out, but it is the most recent at least. I don't really notice any notable changes that would really change this up. Third is kind of Nick's ceiling in the shot. He would have to make some drastic improvements in order to take on and beat Hadi and Derek. So regardless, I have him in third. For the 2023 top 3, the side tricep was the most underwhelming pose for all of them. I originally had Samson and Derek very narrowly in third and second, but that's just because I didn't have any strong opinions on this one. It wasn't like they were fighting tooth and nail with fantastic poses. I had Hadi in first just for the overall polish. His midsection is what put him a little above the other two for me. Thankfully, Nick is the exact opposite of underwhelming in the shot. It's one of his strongest poses. I'm putting him in first right away. He has the second biggest tricep next to Samson, but Samson needs more conditioning and tricep separation to capitalize on that. And Nick Walker schools him in both of those areas, conditioning and separation. That same conditioning and separation translates throughout Nick's entire physique. His side leg looks gnarly, for example. He may not have the deepest cuts, but that doesn't mean he's not conditioned. He still probably has the second best side leg next to Derek in this shot. And he beats Derek on everything else easily, from midsection to tricep, so I don't really think it's hard to see why he places higher than Derek. Nick also has a terrific midsection, which was Hadi's main selling point. This is going to be controversial, but I like Nick's abs here more in this angle rather than Hadi's. I do not think this will be the case once we get to the abs and thigh shot, and it definitely wasn't true in the earlier two front poses, but for this one, I think it's fair. I like the deeper crevices between Nick's abs, and a really nice touch on the shot, and this area specifically, is how he's hitting the shot. He's tilting just enough to showcase the thickness and the width of his physique, but not enough to make his waist look thick. He's twisting the perfect amount and somehow has elements of a V taper from the shoulders to the pecs, then down to the waist. Overall, Nick's beating everyone on their best attributes, or at least getting close, and he has the best tricep in this pose with the conditioning he's bringing. He's clearly in first. I'm not even going to throw up a recent pick. The other guys are so underwhelming that he would really have to drop the ball to lose what is one of his strongest poses to these guys. The abs and thighs pose is one where I think Nick is actually very strong. I think his abs are phenomenal, and as long as his waist is in check, his legs tend to look bigger and he can bring some okay taper. However, at the 2022 Olympia, by pushing the size and the freak factor, Nick sold himself short for this pose. For example, it was much better at the Arnold Classic. He was downsized as a whole there, and while that may have hurt him in some shots, it helped him in the abs and thighs because his waist was a lot tighter. At last year's Olympia, he still had great abs and the legs are okay, but Nick looks a little bloated. Because of this, I'm actually not going to place him that high. Initially in this pose, I had placed Samson, Derek, and Hadi in ascending order from worst to best. I'm fine with sticking Nick over Samson, but that's about it. Samson honestly has some of the same stomach distension going on as well, but he doesn't have the abs of Nick. Nick is not placing higher than Derek or Hadi though. Hadi is clearly winning. His abs are phenomenal, the obliques are shredded, and the legs lack a little bit in sweep, but they are pretty strong with the amount of detail he's bringing. Now initially in my first video, I did knock Derek to second because he was hitting a vacuum. I believe it's all good to hit a vacuum in Classic, but in the Open, I don't like it as much. He almost never hit an actual abs and thigh shot because his abs suck, so he opted to use a vacuum. It's just a way to hide something from the judges, like turning to the front for a side tricep, which a lot of guys do nowadays. I didn't knock Derek all the way down to third though, because I can still appreciate the fact that he can at least do a vacuum in the Open division, and Samson's pose was just so meh, I decided to keep Derek in second. And honestly, I'm going to keep it that way for now. And unfortunately for us, Nick did not put out an abs and thighs update throughout his entire Olympia prep this year. So I'm going to have to leave him in third, because with his promise of a bigger and freakier version, I can't really predict what his waist would have looked like in this shot. Keep in mind that his abs and thighs from the 2023 Arnold beats Derek in my opinion. I think with the added taper, he's able to place a little ahead of Derek, especially because Derek is bending the rules and I have to knock him down. But would we have seen something as good as Nick's 2023 Arnold's abs and thighs? I have no idea, so for now, I'll keep him in third. The most muscular is Nick's strongest shot easily. Firstly, I think he beats Derek easily. Everyone does. Derek's chest and shoulders look like Play-Doh, and the other guys just look way more impressive. Now, surprisingly, I think Samson brings a really strong case against Nick. We want to be impressed with this shot, and a competitor needs to be filling out their frame to the max. Samson is obviously very impressive. He's so tall, and most of the time, tall guys just don't do very well filling out their frames. Samson towers over the competition, but still manages to fill out his frame to about 90% of where it should be. So yes, Samson gets close. He has a lot of wow factor, but because he's not filling out his frame to 100%, I'm going to give the edge to Nick Walker. As much as Samson draws your eyes, this is still the most muscular pose, and Nick is clearly filling out more of his frame. Like I said, Samson is getting there, but I want to see a little bit more size on the delts and especially the arms. Some better conditioning and detail would also add some icing to that cake once he finishes adding more size. I'm only giving Nick second though, not first, because I still feel Hottie locks this one down. He's quite muscular. I'd say just as muscular as Nick, and he has the qualities that usually only Nick possesses in a lineup, that being the great density and detail. Hottie is handily beating Nick in both of those areas. The amount of graininess and detail throughout Hottie's entire physique in the shot is insane. I do expect Nick to catch up later in his career, but Hottie has over a decade of heavy and hard training experience on Nick, and we can clearly see that with this shot. So while Nick's pose is one of the best in the world, Hottie's is too, and his is just a little bit better with him being just as muscular as Nick and bringing more detail too. And finally, let's take a look at Nick's last prep updates for this shot, and we actually have a couple. Honestly, these are the pics that specifically made me want to do this video. That shot of him with just the natural lighting in the gym is absolutely insane. We can see that more chest striations have been dug out, the arms and delts are looking bigger, the midsection still looks fantastic, even when it's on full display in the way that he's hitting it in that one. I think that firmly cements his second place with the update considered. Any doubt I had that Nick might have lost to Samson left after I saw that pic. Nick has just added too much muscle. That may have helped him prevail over Samson, but I don't think that's quite what he needed to take out Hottie. Maybe Nick could have overpowered him once they got together on stage, but Hottie still would have had the upper hand in the overall detail, and I still probably would have liked Hottie's abs and legs better. So I do think with these update photos in mind, Nick actually digs in a little bit on the runner-up spot for this pose, but still falls short to Hottie. Alright, now it's time to tally up the scores. For this video, I did the same as I do in my other videos. I ranked each guy in each pose from first to fourth. If someone got fourth, they got 4 points for that pose, and the same applies all the way up to first place being worth 1 point. Then I added up everyone's score from each pose, and the lowest score wins. Now for these scores, I went ahead and considered everything when tallying these up. So if I had Nick third in a pose just based off the 2022 Olympia version, but then I had him moving up into say second based on the update photos, then I went ahead and used the latter score. I took a lot of leeway with this comparison. I don't really care because at the end of the day, this is the best I can do on this comparison since I used offstage prep photos or photos from a year-old contest. I absolutely understand that I'm really pulling these scores out of my ass, but by doing a whole video on it and explaining my thoughts, you at least know my arguments and where I'm coming from. I don't want to hear shit in the comments that that's not what he would have looked like, or you're using Instagram pics next to stage shots, this isn't accurate. Yes, I know all of that. Don't say that retarded shit in my comments thinking you're clever. This entire comparison is a mirage of what could have been. Anyway, here are the scores, with Nick's score being influenced by both his 2022 Olympia photos and his prep updates. In fourth with 29 points was Samson Dauda. I don't think anyone is going to argue with this one. Even the judges on the scorecard put Samson in a distant third place when it was just Hottie, Derek, and himself. In third with 21 points was actually Derek Lunsford. And in second by a 3-point decision was Nick with 18 points. And finally, in a clear first with 11 points was of course Hottie. Let's break down those top 3 results a little bit more. Firstly, I had Hottie winning decisively over Nick and Derek. This was also the case in my Was Hottie Robbed vid. I thought Hottie was clearly the winner. I still kind of think that now, but we'll come back to Hottie. Now, Nick only beat Derek by 3 points, which sure may not be that much, but I think something very interesting happens when you insert Nick into the original top 3. I am a firm believer in the lineup itself can change your placing. You can be the odd man out, and so the judges subconsciously change their criteria because the other guys are more alike. And similar things happen when you introduce Nick into the lineup. I think he's a lot more like Hottie than Derek or Samson. So yeah, I do think Derek and Samson would have been pushed to third and fourth because they're unlike the status quo, which was Hottie going into the show. And as I said, Nick is more like Hottie. Going with that theory, the judges probably would have wanted to see more muscle and better conditioning, and those are the categories that Nick excels in. Not so much the shape category that they seem to just run with this year. On the other hand, I can see this theory actually going the opposite way. Hottie would probably hold on to the runner-up spot because he's bringing a lot more shape than Nick, and Nick would probably fall all the way down to fourth because in this version of the theory, the judges full send on the shape to send a message to the the other guys. And as a result, they'd probably still go with Derek as the winner, but mark Nick down heavily. I really don't think that would be the case though. I think Nick brings enough muscularity and conditioning that he's undeniable. It's kind of hard for the judges to give guys with better shape higher placings than Nick when Nick is so far ahead of them in terms of muscle and condition. So personally, I think Nick probably would have placed around second, but I do think that given the opportunity to compare himself to Hadi, he may have actually had a case for himself to win and won this year's Olympia. I know most of you guys probably won't agree with me just based on the results of the poll I put out last week. The number one result was actually for Nick in third, which is definitely the safe option. But what surprised me is how many of you actually think he could have won, over a quarter of you. At least most of us are in the consensus that he probably would have placed top 3 with only 23% saying otherwise. Overall, I think Nick would have done really well or pretty poor by his standards. If you go with my first theory that he would have been compared more with Hadi, I think he could have been second or maybe even first. But if the judges were still hell-bent on pushing the shape category above all else, I think he could have placed behind Samson yet again, especially because Samson just beat him at the Arnold earlier this year. It's a real shame that we'll never know, but I still think Nick's best days and best physiques are ahead of him. He's visited the doctor and luckily his hamstring tear is just minor and he will not need surgery, which is great. Nick still has to recover, sure, but at least he doesn't have to recover for longer from an actual invasive surgery. He's already back in the gym doing what he can, and that's truly inspiring to see. I think Nick is built for these types of things. With his mentality, we'll see him back soon and probably better than ever. And with that, I'm going to end the video here. Definitely let me know how you guys saw this comparison. I know a lot of you are Nick Walker haters, and that's okay. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts still. Or hey, if you love Nick Walker's Freak Factor and think that this is what the Open should be all about, let me know your thoughts as well. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more just like this one. And finally, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.